Hello again. In just a moment, the press preview. I'll look at what's going on in the morning papers. But first, the top stories here on Sky News. There are calls for the Commons Speaker, John Bercow, to stand down after revealed he had voted Remain in the EU referendum. President Trump has said America stands behind Japan 100% after North Korea fired a ballistic missile towards the country. At the BAFTAs, La La Land has won Best Film, Best Actress for Emma Stone and Best Director at tonight's ceremony at the Royal Albert Hall. You're watching the press preview on Sky News. Joining me this evening is former Labour MP and Culture Secretary Baroness Jowell and The Sun on Sunday's political editor David Wooding. But first, let's just remind you what's on the fronts of those pages. Let's have a look through. The Eye leads with Labour's plans to divert immigration to cities to ease the pressure on public services. The government is being accused of a full frontal attack on whistleblowers and journalists by proposing harsher sentences in the Espionage Act, reports The Guardian. The Daily Telegraph says the Justice Secretary will announce wicked offenders will not be released to meet prison population targets. Members of the House of Lords have announced amendments that may cause delays to legislation needed to activate Article 50, according to the Daily Express. The Daily Mail points the finger at Whitehall, claiming failed projects and compensation payouts have cost taxpayers £5.5 billion in 2 years. An Albanian fugitive who was deported and banned from the UK after being on Interpol's most wanted list in 2009 has sneaked back in the UK, according to The Sun. The Metro reports 2 out of 3 Met police officers believe they should wear taser guns on patrol. Britain's high streets may begin to suffer due to a large increase in business rates, is on the front of the Times. The FT says 1 in 10 of Britain's top 100 firms are considering ditching long-term incentive plans for their bosses amid concerns over high pay. Well, I'm joined by Tessa and David here. David, I can firstly start with the Mail, page 6. The Speaker of the House, John Bercow, has he gone a step too far?
Well, he's not a totally popular figure in the Commons, it's fair to say. A lot of MPs find him a little pompous and don't like his style, and particularly among the Conservative benches. And of course, there's a no confidence vote being tabled against him, which will come before the Commons next week, which is quite serious in itself. I'm not sure it'll come to anything at the moment, but there is a bit of a groundswell growing against him. A lot of MPs are coming out with all sorts of cases of where they believe he has overstepped the mark. And one of the stories that came out this morning was that he'd said to some students that he voted for Remain and that he should be a very impartial figure because he is the chairman of the Commons and is supposed to be above politics. And of course, the thing which started all this off was his attack on Donald Trump, where he effectively barred him from the Houses of Parliament, which he does not have a right to do so. And now what's happened, the Daily Mail story here, is that ministers are being given a free vote. So Theresa May, the Prime Minister, has said that I will not whip you on this vote. You can decide, you can vote how you like against Trump. So that gives a little bit of weight to the guys who want him out.
Yeah, but you know, there's always been a section of the parliamentary Tory party that hasn't liked John Bercow. Hasn't liked John Bercow because he's socially liberal, economically conservative and very popular with a lot of Labour MPs because, you know, before it went with the kind of majority view, he was in favour of, increasing anti-discrimination for people who were gay and so forth. So he's always been a controversial figure. I think he has been a really excellent speaker. And I think that, you know, if you pick your way through a lot of this pretty bilious coverage of him, the claims against him are pretty thin. And certainly David Lidington this morning, who's the leader of the House of Commons, was very measured in, and I think proper, in drawing a distinction between the role of the government intervening. That was not saying that the government was failing to back him. He was very clear that it wasn't the government's job to intervene in the House of Commons relationship with the Speaker. So I hope very much that if there is a vote this week, that he'll survive it, because he is a very good speaker for the House of Commons at this time. And so he was caught on camera talking about how he voted in the referendum. You know, he's not muzzled as the Speaker. You know, Theresa May is the Prime Minister. She campaigned for Remain, and now she's delivering Brexit. You know, the important thing is that he acts with impartiality in securing balance in debates on the floor of the House of Commons.
I think he has.
And he does.
I think he has been impartial in the way he handled the Brexit debate.
Absolutely.
Certainly, there are a number of issues which have come out, which are in the Mail here, which some MPs feel he has silenced them from saying things which they believe should be brought out, and that has increased the rancour among some of those MPs. It's fair to say as well, he was a bit of a right-wing MP who had this amazing journey to the left.
He certainly
and I
did,
suspect
yes.
some of the reasons some of the Labour people who used to hate him now rather like him, because he winds up the Conservatives.
Okay,
somewhat.
lots to get through. Let's move on to page 2 of the Times. The story about child refugees. The U-turn is heartless.
Well, I mean, let me just say that my daughter works for one of the organisations, Help Refugees, that's been representing these children. But, you know, this is an incomprehensible decision by the government. They'd done the difficult thing. They'd had the debate in Parliament. And this was a very clear humanitarian decision to extend support and care to children who are vulnerable, to traffickers, to sexual exploitation, and, you know, just intolerable physical conditions. And Parliament agreed, the Immigration Act was amended to provide for up to 3,000 children. And then suddenly, last week, the government reneged on that, saying only 350 children would be accepted. The principal ground being that local authorities didn't have places for them. And immediately, you know, a number of local authorities have come forward and said, we offered more places, but they were not taken up. I think Lambeth Council offered 21 more places that weren't taken. So there is now an outcry among this, because this was seen even by, I think I'm right, the papers like the Daily Mail, which don't normally campaign for refugees, as a statement of humanitarian compassion by this country. And the sooner Amber Rudd realises that she should just reverse this decision and get back onto the page of decency that this decision represented, the better.
David, do you think Amber Rudd's going to end up regretting this? Because initially the figure was 3,000 children being allowed into the country, and then there's this cap of 350. That is a huge difference.
It's a bit baffling, this. I think we journalists have got some work to do on this story to try and find out what really is behind this. It's fair to say, Tessa's rather eloquently put the case for having more child refugees here. I think part of the problem in PR terms, where it all went wrong, was on the first day when the child refugees arrived. They all looked like rather older than child refugees.
Well, if you've been coping for 6 months with no parents and all the rest of it,
I think if they'd have put up some little kids to start with, rather than the men who we saw arriving, the PR end of this would have been handled better. I think that some people lost a bit of sympathy there, but that doesn't take away the fact that we should be taking in child refugees. I agree.
Okay, lots more to do. Let's move on to the Eye front page, a story about Labour plans regional curb on migrants. So which part of Labour is saying this? Is it Jeremy Corbyn and the Islington elite, or is it other Labour MPs?
This is a kind of omnibus story following on Tom Watson's television interview this morning, where he covered a whole lot of things. Lots of stories in Sunday's papers about who might succeed Jeremy Corbyn, lots of stories about the 2 forthcoming by-elections, lots about, Labour in the polls, and very specifically offering an alternative way of managing migration. And I mean, I think that the challenge facing Labour is much bigger than just Jeremy Corbyn. I think that what we're seeing is the challenge to Labour being, and the rise of populism being reflected not just in this country but right across Europe, with Marine Le Pen in France, Geert Wilders in Holland, populism particularly in Italian mayors. And I think that just believing somehow that if the Labour Party were to move Jeremy Corbyn out and move another leader in, somehow Labour would be restored, I think is taking too superficial a view. I think the Labour Party, it's been my party for 40 years, is resilient and will recover over time, but only by taking account of the scale of the forces that have created the position that Labour's now in.
David, what about these rumours that the Labour Party are looking at potential new leadership possibilities? Tom Watson saying no, that's not true. They're going to stick with Mr. Corbyn, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it must be true because it's my story in this morning's paper.
Oh, that's right.
So what the Labour Party have done is they've been having focus groups and polls.
You made a lot of trouble today.
Yes,
then.
I have. Well,
yes.
that's what I'm here for. and they've been looking at potential new leadership material. Now, they say it isn't, it's just part of their polls. But nevertheless, various people in there, like Angela Rayner, John McDonnell, they've been asking people what they think about them and what they think about Jeremy Corbyn. People say he looks a bit scruffy and a little bit like a school teacher and so forth. And they've been trying to weigh up, perhaps, I suspect, who they can start promoting and pushing forward. Because Jeremy Corbyn is struggling on his own and they need to get some new figures out there. So either way, they want to get some front benchers who we don't know any of them. This is the problem. We know Tom Watson. People say that he's replacing unknown people with more unknown people. So they really do need to, it's very wise of them to do this. They need to identify, not necessarily who's the heir apparent, but who are the big names of the future, and promote them and push them onto television and radio.
OK, David, Tessa for now, thank you. Stay with us on Sky News. Lots more to come. Hello there, welcome back to our press previews with Baroness Jowell and David Wooding. Let's move on to this story that's on the front page of the Telegraph about migration and the link with the state pension.
Well, this is another story which is linked to the impact of reducing migration, which will be part of the Brexit settlement, on the wider economy. And John Cridland, former Director General of the CBI, has undertaken a study which has essentially shown that the reduction in the number of migrants will not reduce the need for labour, and therefore it may be necessary to fill that gap by raising the pension age by people working longer. And I think there's quite a lot of data now emerging about the contraction in the economy that substantial reduction in migration will create. I mean, migrants are net contributors to taxes in this country. You know, however unpalatable that may be to for some people to hear, it is a fact. And, you know, if you go out of London, for instance, or out of Birmingham, Manchester, you know, where so much of the agricultural economy is dependent on migrant labour. When I was employment minister, there was what was called structural unemployment in London, sectors of the London economy that you simply couldn't develop because there weren't people who would do the jobs, and coffee shops, hospitality, and so forth. And they flourished since the free movement and immigration of people from Europe. And so, you know, we've got to be aware of the consequences. And, you know, we've talked about the absolutely clear position of the House of Lords not to impede Brexit, but to point up and to probe the government on some of these, what I think for many people who voted to leave will be unintended consequences. You know, how often have we read in the last few months in the papers people saying they will not vote to get poorer? And that's why the complex interaction of all these economic factors need to be understood.
And David, is that going to bother? Is that going to deter the Brexiteers?
Well, there's a price to pay for staying in Europe. There's a price to pay for leaving Europe. And, you know, these things balance out. If people want to leave Europe, there are things they know are going to change. And this is one of the many things. So I think if people really want to leave Europe, they want to curb immigration, they want to take back control, then maybe they'll be happy to work an extra 18 months.
OK, lots to get through. Let's move on to The Sun now. Inside, all about the BAFTA Awards, Tessa.
Well, I mean, this is just a bit of fun, really. This is, you know, obviously congratulations to all the BAFTA winners. And in a way, not many surprises, I don't think. But, you know, The Sun have done a great page on the BAFTA dresses, not including the Duchess of Cambridge rather gorgeous Alexander McQueen dress, which apparently cost 6,000 quid, but it's beautiful, but all the other dresses of the stars. And I mean, and that's part of the entertainment of the BAFTAs, you know, the red carpet. I remember going, however, one year when there was a complete malfunction in the red carpet and it had obviously been cleaned with foam that, since it was pouring down with rain, was then kind of seeping out from every bit of it. And so the stars were having to pick their way through this this foamy mess in order to get to get their pictures taken. But anyway, you know, this just shows some of the gorgeous dresses that no doubt a lot of these stars spent months planning and lots of money on.
Yeah, it is a double page spread in the paper, and the Duchess of Cambridge is looking absolutely stunning.
Fabulous.
With the pictures that we were showing our viewers. OK, let's move to the Times. We've only got a minute to go. Entertaining story here, David, about about office lunches.
Yes, well, it seems we're all creatures of habit. 3 out of 4 office workers have the same thing every day for lunch. Now, I mean, no one, and they admit, of course, that they're bored with eating the same stuff. I mean, the most common lunch is would you believe, a ham sandwich, followed by a cheese sandwich. What exciting lives people have. And then a chicken sandwich. Salad comes 4th and egg sandwiches comes 5th. I mean, I don't know, do you have the same thing every day?
I must admit that I always have a sweet potato with cheese and tuna for my lunch every time I'm in.
Now, if we're talking about breakfast...
I thought you were going to say Brexit then.
No, I have porridge every day.
Yeah, porridge every day. On a Saturday, when I'm in the head office and not in the Commons, I tend to have the same thing.
Can you really believe, with all that's going on in the world, we're sitting here talking about what we eat for breakfast?
I have to have a frothy coffee after editorial conference. That's the most important thing.
We're creatures of habits, human beings.
Yes.
Tessa and David, many thanks indeed for joining us this evening. Let's have a look at what the weather's got in store for us.